Prospects for the Kennedy-Johnson ticket in your home state of Missouri?
Carried by an overwhelming majority. Don't you worry about that.
I'd like to ask the senator, we've been hearing of him this week, is not being in the best of health. How are you feeling this morning?
I'm all recovered.
And your voice and your sinus?
All right.
Mighty glad to see you looking so well.
Thank you very much.
Senator, voting WDAF. There has been some complaints by newsmen that the incumbent president does not hold news conferences often enough. If you're elected president, what will your policy be in regard to the holding of news conferences?
Well, I think it's probably a question that would better wait, but I do think it's useful to see the press. I think the custom has been once a week, and I would think that whoever is president would certainly see the press at least once a week.
You don't rely on you.
Could you tell us what you think the overriding issue in this campaign is?
There are so many of them that I can't explain them all here without making politics.
Could you name the single?
Yes, there are 3 or 4 of them. Principal ones, I think, is the destruction of the foreign policy of the United States of America. And the next one is the handling of the agricultural policy. You know, they quarrel about what it costs to have an agricultural policy in this country. It cost $1 billion the last 2 years I was in office. It's now costing $6 billion. The operation of the national debt and the handling of the finances of the United States has been a disgrace to the country, and it cost the poor people about $20 billion. I think those are the principal issues, and I couldn't speak to you, Senator, because you know what they are as well as I do. You've been there.
Did you make any recommendations to the candidate about foreign policy? Any specific recommendations?
The recommendations that I make are made on questions from the candidate for president as a result of my experience, and you have to ask him about that.
Kennedy say something about that?
All right.
First, may I say that in behalf of Senator Kennedy, he is very grateful that President Truman has given me this opportunity to visit with him. Senator Kennedy feels that the participation of President Truman in his forthcoming campaign is most important and invaluable to his cause. I had a conversation with President Truman a few weeks ago, and as you know, Senator Kennedy last week called President Truman from Hyannis. The President was most gracious and invited me out here to talk with him concerning the President's participation. In the general discussion, we are anxious for the President's advice as well as his active participation in the forthcoming campaign. It is Senator Kennedy's intention, Congress permitting, for him to pay a personal visit to Independence to talk with President Truman on Saturday, August 20th, at which time it will be up to the President Truman and Senator Kennedy as to what they will discuss. Now, it is in discussing the President's participation in the campaign, it was felt that President Truman will have a schedule of major addresses. Senator Kennedy will make up a list of locations in which he and President Truman believe that he can make the greatest contribution. These appearances will be cleared with the President for his approval. They will, the dates and places will be given out at a later time.
I've had a most pleasant visit with the governor, and when the senator comes to discuss the program, we'll have no difficulty in working it out. As he's told you, there'll be certain appearances that will, we hope, help the ticket. And that's all there is to the situation.
Mr. President, do you know how many places you will visit or what parts of the country you'll concentrate?
Not till after I've had a conference with the presidential nominee, Senator Kennedy.
Is there any approximation, Mr. President, 6 or 8 maybe species?
Well, you never can tell. Your guess will be as good as mine, Bill, and you're usually outguessing me, but after I've talked to the governor, after I've talked to the senator, after I've talked to the senator, by then you'll have the information, and you better have it from the source after we've made up our minds.
Mr. President, would you like to do any whistle-stop campaigns?
No, I'm too old for that now.
You don't
The
feel-
campaign will have to be run by the new nominee, and he may have other ideas. That was my idea in 1948, and it's passé now.
Mr. President, at your press conference here July 2nd, you questioned whether the senator was quite ready for the job at this time. Is there still a question?
The Democratic Convention decided that, and that's all there is to say about it.
Thomas Dewey used some quotes from that press conference when he addressed the Republican convention. Do you feel that you have given the Republicans some effective
He's
campaign?
very short of issues, as he always is, so don't worry about him.
Mr. President, do you have any predictions about the outcome of the election?
The Democrats will win. They'll have to save the country. Can't do anything else.
Mr. President, what do you think of the Republican ticket?
I don't think much of it, as I'll express to you when I get ready to talk about it.
Mr. President, would you like to see the senator give the country a given hell-type campaign?
The senator will have to make up his mind on the sort of campaign that he thinks will win. That was my idea, and it wasn't a give 'em hell campaign. It was a campaign which told the truth on the Republicans, and they thought it was hell.
Mr. President, do you believe there's such a thing as a new nation?
No, it couldn't be. Too old to change.
Governor, what are the principal issues of the campaign as you see them from an Eastern standpoint?
Well, I don't think today there's any difference in issues of the campaign in north, south, east, or west. I think the United States is one nation facing a great many problems in the international field and the domestic field. I think the problem of the United States' strength and a peace that has meaning with justice is the basic issue nationally, internationally. And of course, Senator Kennedy has said time and time again, the number one
soft on communism. This is the sort of thing which panicky people do when they become frightened and when they realize that the issues are beginning to run against them. There are in this campaign genuine issues which we should be able to discuss about communism. But those issues are not the completely phony ones about who is tough and who is soft. I think virtually all Americans are against communism. And the only differences within our country consist of determining just what course will best turn back communism. I do not think there's anything that will serve our people poorer than to divide them on a completely false premise as to whether someone is or is not soft or naive on communism, or whether someone is or is not a patriot. In fact, this kind of divisive politicking serves Mr. Khrushchev perfectly, because he would like to see our country divided on the age-old rule which has been employed by dictators since the early dawn of history of divide and conquer. For the past few years, we've heard a lot of talk about old personalities and new personalities. Apparently, the new personality hasn't changed in the slightest. It just goes back to the old personality that reasserted itself when the issue started running against the Republican Party. I think it's time to call a moratorium on the kind of campaigning that questions the motives and the patriotism of an opponent. And I think the American people would like to have a clear and definite statement as to whether this kind of campaigning will be repudiated or whether we're going to have another period of campaigning by innuendo. We all understand that American campaigning is vigorous and sometimes rough. But there is a point in which the future of Americans can be jeopardized by irresponsible mudslinging, and I believe it's time to draw the line and set down some ground rules. It's time somebody blow the whistle. President Truman has graciously asked me to drive out to his old farm with him at the conclusion of this meeting with you this morning. And your
WPAF News, Kansas City. Vice President Nixon has suggested a moratorium of campaign talk on American weakness and loss of prestige during Khrushchev's presence in this country. I would like to have your comment on the Vice President's suggestion and also President Truman's comment.
I believe in free speech. I'm not fearful of the American people. I think they can be trusted to hear from their leaders at any time about anything. I would like to have a moratorium on questioning people's motives and patriotism, and that is what I've called for.
President Truman?
Ask the question again. I'll answer for you.
Vice President Nixon's suggestion about a moratorium on talk about American weakness and loss of prestige during the campaign while Khrushchev was in this country.
Well, he has to take the responsibility of the fact that the loss of prestige came about through the 8 years of Republican administration, and he can't get out from under it. That's what he's trying to do, so we won't let him do that now, Lyndon.
May I ask a question, President Truman? Mike Post of St. Louis Public Press. The words were going around Jeff City, Mr. President, that you were in favor of Charlie Brown for the Senate seat.
I was in favor of a man from...
Well, I think, first of all, we should have a very plain and direct statement on it. And all my public life, I have believed in the Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights of the United States. I've tried to live up to my oath of office. And I believe all of them require and impose upon every public servant not only the obligation but the duty to see that every individual, regardless of race, color, or creed, is fully protected in all of his constitutional rights. Now, in order to... the Democrats became the majority party in the Congress. And I have served in 3 Congresses as a leader of the Democrats. I would be less than frank. I don't speak at any great length on it. This is a subject that can be spoken at great length, as you observed. But in 3 Congresses, we have passed 2 civil rights bills. Civil rights bills that were satisfactory to the author, Congressman Seller from Brooklyn. Civil rights bill that was satisfactory to the Attorney General of the United States. Civil rights bill that the President of the United States signed. So, after no legislation and no progress for 80 years, and particularly no progress for the 2 years in which the Republicans had complete unquestioned control, in the 3 Congresses that I have been leader of, the Senate has passed 2 civil rights bills in those 3 Congresses. And I think our platform is very clear and emphatic on our belief in that field, and I would summarize it all in one statement. That I think that every person should be fully protected in his full constitutional rights. Auditorium where we had the tea, and they stood outside in line, all in a poker game. Answer is no, they're not going to carry Texas. And second thing, I would be embarrassed if they did carry Texas or any other state in the union. I have had the papers support me at times.
The Dallas News and the Chicago Tribune are for you. You're wrong.
I can't remember. I can't remember really when the Independent Democratic advertised Dallas News ever enthusiastically supported the Democratic ticket. Now, I've been in politics a long time. I was elected first in 37. Opposed.
Ever been to the NBC? I'd like to ask a question, if I may, of the President. Would you tell us, sir, please, your evaluation of how the campaign is going now? And would you tell us, please, what advice this time you have given to Senator Johnson about how to campaign?
That last part of your question is confidential between myself and the senator, or the vice president, as he will be. But I think the campaign is going well. I think the appearance of Senator Johnson in Boston in the Northeast and Senator Kennedy in Texas and the South has been very satisfactory so far as the Democratic Party is concerned. And if you want a dissertation on these papers that are against us, I hope they'll stay that way because they're always wrong.
Now, I would like to say this, elaborate on your question a little bit. Very frankly, I'm going to talk in some detail to President Truman about the whistle stop that I expect to start early in October, beginning in Washington and ending in New Orleans. And I found out in 1948 that he is the greatest living expert on whistle stops. So I'm going to get a little briefing on the way. I'm going to get a little briefing on my way out to his farm this morning on what to do and what not to do in connection with whistle stops.
You've got to use your own judgment. I'll tell you my experience.
Some of the criticism from Senator of the Vice President Nixon on the communist issue stems from Senator Kennedy's charges that or suggestions that President Eisenhower might have apologized to Khrushchev about the U-2 incident. Can you comment on that, please?
Well, first of all,
Lodge is saying that if they should win in November, Mr. Lodge, as Vice President, will be given direction of American foreign policy and non-military matters. From your experience in the White House, would you say that was either a practical or a wise way to understand?
That shows conclusively that he's not capable of being President of the United States. All right. that the foreign policy of the United States has to be made by the President of the United States, and nobody else can be responsible for it.
I might say that I was shocked when I understood that a candidate was already designating the highest presidential duties that the Constitution vested in the President of the United States. And I would assume the people of America, when they elect their president, would look to him to be their sole spokesman in connection with their relations with other nations. And I believe that if Jack Kennedy is elected, as he will be an able spokesman of this nation.
Some of these days, when you fellows feel like it and you all want to get together, I'll give you a lecture on the duties of the President and how he has to carry them out. I've been talking to 250,000 youngsters in this country, and they know more about it than Nixon does.
Senator Johnson, Scott Douglas, President, Kansas City, Missouri. I asked a question to President Truman the other day about under his administration.
Whoever heard of a farmer calling a farm plan Operation So-and-so? That's not the language of the man, the horny-handed son of toil. And here for 8 years he's been going around bragging on Edward Taft Benson and been one of his advisors. And they've been letting the president veto 5 farm bills. And then here, for 6 or 7 weeks before election, he comes out with a new Operation Farm Plan. And what does it do? It's got a new research program. Well, if they want to research, they've had 8 years to research. And the research will show them 2 things that are very significant. One is that the farm mortgages have gone up 50%. And farm income has gone down 33%. And if you got that much research, you can just close off the research and start doing something about it. And that's what Jack Kennedy is going to do when he's elected president.
You don't make